I think about, man, I have to perform songs every single night or every other night.
Before there were sold-out stadiums, before the Grammys lined up to hand him trophies, there was a kid in Honolulu who already knew what it felt like to stand under stage lights. Most children are learning their alphabet at 4 years old. Peter Jean Hernandez, the boy the world would eventually know as Bruno Mars, was already performing. He was born on October 8, 1985, in Honolulu, Hawaii, into a family where music wasn't a hobby, it was the family business. His father played percussion and loved doo-wop and old rock and roll. His mother sang and danced. Growing up in a house full of instruments and performers, Bruno didn't choose music so much as he was born into it. By the time he was a toddler, he was already imitating the artists he watched on television, and it wasn't long before his family noticed he had something rare: timing, charisma, and an uncanny ability to hold an audience's attention. As a young child, he became part of his family's touring act in Waikiki, performing impressions of stars like Elvis Presley. It earned him local nicknames and local fame long before he had any concept of what a record deal even was. While most kids his age were worried about losing teeth and learning to ride bikes, Bruno was learning stage blocking, vocal runs, and how to read a crowd. That kind of early immersion shapes a person. It either burns a kid out or it forges something unbreakable. In Bruno's case, it built the foundation of a performer who, decades later, would still talk about loving the stage more than almost anything else in his life. As he grew older, the family act eventually came to an end, the way most childhood things do. Life in Hawaii wasn't easy, and like many families chasing a dream, there were real financial struggles along the way. But Bruno kept circling back to the same idea. He wanted to make music, and he wanted to do it on a bigger stage than Waikiki could offer. At 18, he made the leap that thousands of hopeful musicians make every year. He moved to Los Angeles. Los Angeles is not gentle to dreamers. For every story of overnight success, there are thousands of stories that never get told, of artists who moved to LA with everything they owned and went home with less. Bruno's early years there were a grind. He bounced between cheap apartments, tried to get noticed, and like most new artists, ran into an industry that didn't quite know what to do with him. In 2004, he signed a deal with Motown Records. It seemed like the break he'd been chasing. But the relationship didn't work out, and within roughly a year, he was dropped from the label without releasing an album. For a lot of artists, that kind of rejection ends the dream. For Bruno, it became fuel. It was during this period that he formed one of the most important creative partnerships of his career, joining forces with Philip Lawrence and producer Ari Levine to form a production team known as the Smeezingtons. Instead of chasing a solo deal right away, the trio focused on writing and producing songs for other artists. It turned out to be one of the smartest moves of his career, even if it didn't feel that way at the time. Working largely behind the scenes, Bruno co-wrote hit songs for major artists, building a reputation in the industry as a songwriter who understood hooks, melody, and emotion in a way that few of his peers did. He contributed to chart-topping records for other performers before audiences even knew his name, quietly becoming one of the most in-demand young songwriters in the business. That behind-the-scenes success gave him leverage, and in 2010, Bruno Mars stepped forward as an artist in his own right. His debut studio album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, released in October 2010, introduced the world to the voice behind so many hits they'd already been singing along to. The album blended pop, R&B, reggae, and rock influences into something that felt both nostalgic and fresh. Singles like Just the Way You Are and Grenade became massive global hits, climbing to the top of charts around the world and establishing Bruno as far more than a songwriter for other people. He was a star in his own right, with a voice and stage presence that demanded attention. The success of that debut album wasn't a fluke. In 2012, he released his second studio album, Unorthodox Jukebox, which pushed his sound even further, blending funk, rock, and pop into a record that critics praised for its ambition. The lead single, Locked Out of Heaven, became a massive hit and showcased Bruno's ability to channel influences from decades past, think classic rock and reggae rhythms, into something that felt completely modern. The album cemented him as one of the most versatile pop stars of his generation, an artist who refused to stay in one genre lane. Then came a song that would become one of the defining pop singles of the decade. In late 2014, Bruno teamed up with producer Mark Ronson to release Uptown Funk, a horn-driven, funk revival anthem that exploded across radio, television, and dance floors worldwide. The song spent an extraordinary number of weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming one of the best-selling singles in music history and introducing an entirely new generation to the sound of classic funk and soul reimagined for a modern audience. It was the kind of song that transcended demographics. It played at weddings, in commercials, in clubs, and on the radio in equal measure, the rare crossover hit that genuinely seemed to make everyone happy. Riding that momentum, Bruno released his third studio album, 24K Magic, in November 2016. If Unorthodox Jukebox had been an experiment in genre blending, 24K Magic was a full embrace of nostalgia, channeling 1980s and 90s R&B and funk with a level of precision and love that felt almost like a tribute album. The title track and singles like That's What I Like became massive hits, and the album would go on to sweep the major categories at the 2018 Grammy Awards, winning Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year. It was a rare clean sweep that placed Bruno in an elite category of artists recognized not just for commercial success but for genuine artistic respect from his peers and the industry. But even with all of that success, Bruno wasn't finished reinventing himself. In 2021, he teamed up with longtime collaborator and friend Anderson .Paak to form Silk Sonic, a retro soul and funk duo that felt like a deliberate trip back to the 1970s. Their debut single, Leave the Door Open, was an immediate sensation, eventually winning Record of the Year and Song of the Year at the Grammys. Their full album, An Evening with Silk Sonic, released later that year, was recorded with an emphasis on analog instrumentation and old-school recording techniques, a clear love letter to the soul records that shaped both artists growing up. The project was widely praised not just for its sound but for the obvious chemistry and joy between the two performers, who seemed less like a manufactured duo and more like two friends having the time of their lives making the music they loved. As the years went on, Bruno continued to show up in unexpected places, collaborating across genres and generations. In 2024, he joined Lady Gaga for the duet Die With a Smile, a song that became a massive global hit and introduced him to yet another wave of listeners who connected with its emotional vulnerability. That same year, he also collaborated with Rose of the K-pop group Blackpink on the single APT, a song that became a worldwide phenomenon and highlighted his continued willingness to cross genre and cultural boundaries that many veteran pop stars avoid. Both collaborations reinforced something that had been true of his career from the very beginning. Bruno Mars has never been content staying in one lane, whether that's genre, era, or audience. What's striking about Bruno Mars's career, when you step back and look at it as a whole, is the consistency of reinvention paired with the consistency of quality. Plenty of artists chase trends. Plenty of artists try to recapture an early sound that worked for them once and ride it for the rest of their career. Bruno has done almost the opposite. From doo-wop-influenced pop, to funk rock experimentation, to a full-blown homage to classic R&B, to a dedicated retro soul project, to genre-crossing global collaborations, he has continually moved toward new sounds while somehow keeping his core identity intact. Audiences and critics alike have recognized that through line, the sense that no matter what era of music he's channeling, it's unmistakably him singing it. Behind the catalog of hits is also a story about persistence that doesn't get told as often as the chart numbers do. This is an artist who was famous as a literal child, who lost a record deal as a teenager trying to break into the industry, who spent years writing hits for other people before audiences knew his face, and who built a career not through a single lucky break but through years of grinding, learning the craft, and refining his sound before stepping fully into the spotlight. It's a reminder that even careers that look meteoric from the outside are usually built on a much longer and quieter foundation of work that happens before anyone's watching. As Bruno Mars has moved into his late 30s, there's been a noticeable shift in how he talks about his career publicly, leaning more into reflection. He's spoken in interviews over the years about the pressure of performing constantly, about how deeply touring and live performance are woven into his identity as an artist, and about the responsibility that comes with the kind of longevity he's achieved in an industry that often discards artists after a handful of hit cycles. Where many of his peers from the early 2010s have faded from the spotlight or struggled to maintain relevance, Bruno has managed to stay both commercially successful and critically respected for well over a decade, a feat that's much rarer than the basic math of have a hit song might suggest. There's also something to be said about how Bruno has handled public scrutiny throughout his career. Like virtually every major celebrity, he's been the subject of rumors, speculation, and tabloid attention over the years, ranging from his personal life to his finances to his relationships. Rather than engaging in lengthy public statements or feuds, he has largely let his work speak for itself, occasionally addressing speculation with humor on stage rather than detailed personal confessions. That restraint says something about how he approaches fame itself, as something to be managed carefully rather than something to be performed for its own sake. In an era where so many public figures feel pressure to share every detail of their personal lives for content, Bruno has remained relatively private, letting the music and the live shows carry the narrative of who he is as an artist. His residency performances in Las Vegas have become a notable chapter of his later career, drawing in audiences for elaborate, high-energy shows that showcase both his back catalog and his ongoing collaborations. These residencies have allowed him to combine the spectacle of a full arena tour with a more sustainable performing schedule, something that matters more the longer an artist's career goes. Performing at the level Bruno performs at, full choreography, live band, vocal runs that require real stamina, takes a physical toll that becomes harder to sustain with each passing year, and the residency model has let him continue delivering that level of show without the wear of constant travel. Looking at the full arc of his career, from a 4-year-old performer in Waikiki to a Motown reject, to a behind-the-scenes hitmaker, to a Grammy-sweeping global icon, what stands out most isn't any single song or album. It's the sheer range of musical territory he's covered while staying recognizably, distinctly himself. Few artists move convincingly between funk, reggae, pop balladry, retro soul, and global collaborations without losing their identity in the process. Bruno Mars has done it repeatedly, across more than a decade and a half of major releases, and at nearly 40 years old, he shows no real signs of slowing the pace of his creative output or his ambition. What comes next for Bruno Mars is, as with any artist, impossible to predict with certainty. But the pattern of his career so far suggests an artist who is far more interested in pushing into new sonic territory than coasting on nostalgia for his own greatest hits. Whether that means another full reinvention, another collaborative project like Silk Sonic, or something entirely unexpected, the one constant has been his refusal to stand still. From the kid doing 2 shows a night before most children could read fluently, to the artist who has spent close to 2 decades at the top of an industry that chews up and discards talent at a brutal pace, Bruno Mars's story isn't really about one rumor, one scandal, or one moment. It's about an unusually long and disciplined climb, built one genre, one album, and one performance at a time.